Improve the timing and rhythm of your tunes and embellishments with the extended counting method. Stay tuned. Well, hello everybody, I'm Matt Willis Bagpiper, and on this channel I make videos to make you a stronger and more confident piper. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment below with any thoughts you might have, and no, I do give Skype lessons if you want more personalized instruction. But now, let's get on with it. There's a link to free PDF downloads below. One of them is the music itself with the writing on it. Another one is the definition sheet, if you will, of how we're going to go about doing all of this. So go ahead, download these, put them on a tablet, print them out, whatever you need to do so you can follow along. In previous videos, I used a more simple counting method to count out the basic rhythm of the big notes of a tune so we get the general gist of the melody. But if we want to get all of the nuance, all of the rhythmic richness that comes with pipe music, we want to make sure that we can wrap our voices around the very specific rhythms of the bagpipe embellishments. So this method works best for simple parade-style tunes and slow airs that are in simple time. Compound time, which are like 6/8, 9/8, 12/8, those are a little beyond the scope of what this method works best for. There'll be future videos linked up here when they're finally ready that will discuss how to go about wrapping your voice around compound time tunes and more advanced tunes, maybe like jigs, reels, strathspeys. For now, this is about getting the beginning piper a strong sense of rhythm in simple time basic marches like Hyra de Gerlach, Scott and the Brave, Green Hills of Two-Roll, those type of tunes. In this method, I've done my best to come up with kind of a codified system, if you will, of words you could say that mimic the rhythm of the embellishments we're playing. If we look at any given embellishment, it's made up of several grace notes, but they're not all of the same importance. If we say look at a tarlua at the top of this whole thing, you can see that there's a low G, a D grace note, another low G, and an E grace note taking you finally to an A. But we're not going to try to wrap our faces around all four of those grace notes because they're not all equally sounded. Said another way, the two low Gs are the actual sounding tones of that embellishment. The D grace note is there to separate the two low Gs into two low Gs. The E grace note is there to give you a nice strong emphasis going to that A, but you don't really hear them. You hear da-da, da-da-da. You hear those two low Gs taking you there. In this method, we're going to try to do that with all of the different embellishments. We'll kind of talk through them as we do it. I think the easiest way to go about this is to start at the beginning of Scotland the Brave. Rather than just kind of talk through this whole thing, let's kind of work it out in process on the tune here. Again, if you haven't watched the other videos, they're kind of imperative because they're the building blocks that we're going to use in creating this extended method. So there'll be a card up somewhere, go check out those videos, make sure that you have that kind of a basic understanding of all that stuff before we move on to this. We're going to start with Scotland the Brave. We can see here, it starts on an and. It has an anacrusis. It has a pickup note. Again, refer to the other videos about a little bit more what that's all about. But know that it kind of starts on the upbeat, comes down strongly on that one. So the next beat is 1. Now it does have a G grace note, but that G grace note's not really said. It's not a separate sound. It's an emphasis to that low A, but it's not a separate sound. So we're still just going to use the plain 1. That's when the metronome comes down. We're going to put the number 1 on that. But then we have a tarlua. Tarlua has two big fat low Gs. For this method, I'm going to use ada for the two low Gs, and then the 2 will be the top of the next beat. And 1, ada 2, and 1, ada 2. We'll get a metronome out in a minute to get this on a proper, good, steady tempo. But for now, as we're kind of just wrapping our faces around it, we're going to be a little loosey-goosey with the timing because we want to try to figure out how to say all this stuff. When we get to the doublings, I wanted to keep a numerical basis for the sound, but that was hard to do and use the words 1, 2, 3, and 4. So instead, I decided to use the 20, 30, and 40. Bit of a problem, obviously, with 10. There's, you don't want to say 11. That's not the right rhythm. So I went with tenny or tenty or however you want to say it. It's maybe a little awkward, but it works out pretty well, and it gives you that da-da kind of sound. You could also just say da-da, but it doesn't help keep count of where you're at in the tune, and I thought this was pretty useful, especially for the beginner, so that you can really keep track of where you're at on the beat. 30 reminds me a lot more of 3 than did it. There are other embellishments here, however, that are going to have just vocalizations. I couldn't figure out a way to wrap a number around them, but we'll get to those in a minute. So for beats 3 and beats 4, we're going to use the words 30 and 40, which have that da-da, da-da, which sounds an awful lot like an actual doubling when you say it in the proper rhythm. and 1 out of 2, a 30 and 40 and tenny. That high A doubling, I'm going to go just like I did with the other ones. And again, we go into that kind of weird word. I know tenny's not really a word, but maybe it should have been. Tenny, 2 out of 3 and 40 and... For that grip, I'm again doing an ada, just like I did for the tarlua. Now, if your grips are faster than that, they're well developed and they sound great, don't let them be sloppy and terrible. But if they're well developed and they sound good and they're faster, you might want to actually go brum or bra or something, especially if you can roll your R. That might give you something more resembling the cadence of your particular embellishment. For many beginners, though, it would be best if you actually kind of slowed your grips down, open them up a little bit, make sure you hear both low Gs. And so the ada here can be very useful. So looking at bar 2 would be tenny, 2 out of 3 and 40 and, again with those ands coming right on the up. If by chance one of these doublings fell on an upbeat, I would actually say Andy rather than tenny, 20, 30, or 40. Now it doesn't happen too often, especially in beginning level marches, but if it does happen, there's a tool for you right there. It's on an and, so I just put an E at the end of it and it works out great. So now let's go ahead and wrap our faces around the first 2 bars of the music. And 1 out of 2, a 30 and 40 and tenny, 2 out of 3 and 40 and you can hear with that, you're starting to really get the rhythmic nature of not just the melody, but the embellishments that make up the melody. Those embellishments are so critical to have clear and rich pipe music with all of the nuance that I know we're all looking for in our playing. Also, I'm not looking for you to be like an operatic singer. You can even just speak these rhythms out. If you can, though, really try to just sing. You don't have to sing for anybody else. This is not for anybody but you. You can start really trying to make it sound like pipe music when you're saying it. It's going to sound an awful lot more like pipe music when you're playing it. And 1 out of 2, a 30 and 40 and tenny, 2 out of 3 and 40 and that moves us to bong. That moves us to our next note. So in starting bar 3, we now have a throw. We have a D throw. If you have a particularly fast D throw, you might want to use a brum rather than the word throw. But I like to use the word throw because it kind of helps. The D throw starts before the beat and goes across the beat. And the word throw, you naturally kind of want to put that TH sound going to the R right before the beat of the metronome, and then the rest of the word happens afterwards. So it kind of feels an awful lot like a D throw actually sounds. Throw 2, a 30 and 40 and you have bar 3. Going into bar 4, we're starting with a grip from A to B. Now for grips that I'm changing notes with, and it doesn't really matter if I'm changing notes up or down, though it's much more common to be changing notes up, I tend to use the word brum. And if you can roll your R, that's great. If you can't, brum works just fine. But you want to try to get some sort of that feeling of almost like a rolled R, that Scottish type accent on this embellishment. In this case, that grip is taking its time away from the low A from the bar before. That doesn't give us very much time, and it certainly doesn't give us enough time to do an ada like we did with the tarlu at the beginning or the grip in that second bar. So I'm going to use the word brum instead, and then we're going to go straight to the next beat because that's on a quarter note. We're going to go straight to the next beat, which has a doubling, and that's going to be 20. So again, with grips and throws, I couldn't find a way to say a number and have it have the right sound, so I just use a different word instead and then get right back on my numerical system as soon as I can. And then finally, before we sing it, you can see it ends with a 4E and a. Now, normally in the simple counting method, that would be 4E and a where they're even, 4E and a da 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 da. We know the end of Scotland Brave is not like that though. It's got a ba ba da ba da. So we're going to actually just kind of maybe fudged it just a little bit and go 4E and a 1. We're going to put slightly more emphasis on the 4 and the and we're going to make lighter emphasis on the E and the and push them a little later. 4E and a 1. 4E and a 1. That's actually one of the trickier parts of the tune for most beginners learning it. They don't get the rhythm quite right, they don't get the gracing quite right, or they just kind of round the whole thing out or take too long to get through it. It does all fit over one beat. 4E and a 1, with that 1 being the G grace note down to the low A of line 2. So let's try to wrap our faces around bar 4. Brum 23, a 4 and a 1. And I'm going ahead and ending on that 1. That's kind of the end of the phrase, if you will. Brum 23, a 4 and a 1. And just like that, we have the whole line. Let's try just the second phrase real quick, though. And no metronome yet, that'll be the next step. throw 2, a 30 and 40 and brum, 23, a 4 and a 1. And with that, we're getting a very good likeness of the rhythms of Scotland the Brave when played with all the proper embellishments. All right, so we have a metronome ready here. I have it set at 80 beats per minute, but set it at the speed you need where you can keep up with all the rhythms and get all the words in there. And it might take a time or two to get this, under, control and get it your mouth and your voice wrapped around this rather complicated set of words and things. But again, if you can sing or say this with the proper rhythm, it's going to go a long way to being able to play it with the proper rhythm. And 1, out of 2, a 30 and 40 and 22, out of 3 and 40 and throw 2, a 30 and 40 and brum, 23, a 4 and a 1. And we're getting something that sounds enough like Scotland the Brave with all of the stuff in there. Now, as you're working through any of this, if you find that you have other sounds that work better, that you think are a more accurate rhythmic representation of the embellishment than the words I have here, by all means use those. This is not meant to be set in some sort of stone. It's just a tool to help you be able to really feel and count the embellishments and the melody with a metronome so that you can get it all together. But if you have another word, if you'd rather say did it rather than 20 or 30, then do that. Do what works for you. This tends to evolve over time into a more generalized vocable system, if you will, something that just naturally comes out of your mouth and sounds more or less like pipe music. Ba-dum, did-it-dum, ba-did-it-dum, did-it-dum, did-it-dee, ba-did-it-dum, did-it-dum, bra-bum, a-da-da-dee, da-da-do, bram, dee-dee, ya-da-da-da-da-da. So as you're working through this, if you find that some of the words start morphing into other sounds, but still have the proper rhythmic feel and cadence, by all means, use that instead. At the end of the video, I'll have myself singing both Scotland the Brave and Rowan Tree in their entirety, so if you wanted to try to say or sing along with me, that's great. For now, let's move on to Rowan Tree and deal with a few more embellishments. I want to start with the last bar of line 2 or 4 of Rowan Tree, where we have a burl. A burl is another embellishment that can kind of occur at a lot of different speeds. The beginner might have a more slow and open burl, and the more advanced player might have a faster burl. I tend to use the word diddum for a burl, at least when it's from low A to low A. If it's coming from another note, like an E, then you're going to hear the 3 A's. You're going to come down to the first A, and then you're going to do a couple more. That would be diddidum, diddidum with 3 distinct sounds. But in Rowan Tree, it's the more typical ending burl, which is from an A to an A, and I just want to make sure that I don't start that burl in any way early. If anything, I almost want the burl to feel like it's kind of coming after the beat. We're coming from a half note, and so you see the 2 in parentheses again means we're going to be holding the note across that, and we're going to be hitting that burl smartly on the down of 3. 1 diddum, 1 diddum. But if your burl is faster than that, and good for you if it is and it's clean and accurate, you might want to just bra, you might want to roll an R or do another sound. Again, make this work for you. These are ideas. They work with lots of people, but they might not work for you. Do what works for you. If we look at bar 1, the first official bar, not the anacrusis or pickup bar, we have 2 grips in the same bar, and yet they're written differently. We have one that's changing up from the B to the C, and again, there's a video on how to properly do that right there. And then there's another one from a C to a C. Now, for a lot of beginning players, these 2 grips tend to sound a little bit different. When properly played and at full speed, they should have the same feel and cadence. But for a lot of beginners, the grip, when you go from a note to the same note, tends to be a little bit more open as you try to keep it all clean. If that's the case, you might want to do the Ada 3 like I have here, the same Ada that we're using for the high A in Scotland the Brave or the Tarlua. If your grips are faster, you might want to actually just do another brum or bra sound to more mimic what we're doing coming from the B to the C. For now, I'm going to go ahead, turn this metronome on, and I'm going to say it the way I have it written here with that Ada, and we'll see how it works. 4 a brum and Ada 3, 4 tenny and 3, 40 tenny and 3, 40 tenny and 3. And don't get me wrong, trying to go and out of 3, it's a lot going on. But if you look at, well, there's a lot going on. You're going from 8th note C to a grip to another C. It's a lot to try to wrap around. Let's try that again with a brum instead of an ada 3. For a brum and brum, for tenny and you can see the brum replaced the ada 3. Just the brum in general replaced the the da, and the 3. It's all of those kind of wrapped together. For a brum and brum, for... And you can hear there that has a little bit more of the cadence of Rowan Tree. But if your grips aren't that fast yet, you can do what's written here. For a brum and ada 3, for... Just a little harder to kind of say. So Rowan Tree has a lot of notes falling on the up. In here, you can see I have lots of numbers written with parentheses around them. Again, that's where you're holding the note across that. You'll hear the metronome click, but you won't be making a note change yet. You'll be holding the note across that. So I think it's useful to be able to see where those beats are occurring. Let's start with the pickup notes now, going into line 2 and say all of line 2. For a brum and ada 3, for tenny and 30, and tenny and 30, and 1 did-em. And just like that, you have something that's really starting to sound, I think, an awful lot more like Rowan Tree than just 4 a 1 and 3 4 1 and... That's not terrible. It's the melody, but it doesn't give you the sound of the embellishments. And the embellishments, again, are such an important part of the music we make on this grand instrument. Another embellishment that's crazy common is I call it the low G catch. They're often called just low G grace notes. They're done often from B, low G to A. It can be C, low G to A. But anytime you're going from a higher note to a note underneath and then immediately back up, happens a lot on high A, F to G. That happens even in Scott and the Brave. For those, I use the word bois, B-W-A, bois. Again, I don't try to put a number around it. It doesn't quite work. But that low catching note sounds more like a bois to me than a da-da or some more distinctive sound. It should be relatively quick and kind of emphasizing the note rather than sounding like a full-on note of its own. So let's take a look at the last few bars of Scotland the Brave and get that bois in there for the ending low G catch to A. I'm going to start from the D throw of bar 3 of line 2. Throw to a 30 and 40 and brum to a bois. There are other relatively simple tunes with other embellishments that we didn't go over here, and that's okay. Your job is to maybe find a good recording of a piper playing the tune you're talking about and listen to how the rhythmic sound of that embellishment feels. Where does it land against the beat? And try to figure out how you would make your voice fit that rhythm so that you could fit it into the tune so that when you say or sing it, it has the right feel. One example is like a man's a man for all that. You have like a rodent, which is the low G with the B grace note up. Ba ba blah. I'd probably do something like that. The more you can make this your own, the better. So I didn't want to just go through quite literally every embellishment in the universe and try to figure out how to do them. Try to figure out how to make them work for you. And 1 out of 2, a 30 and 40 and tenny, 2 out of 3 and 40 and throw, 2 a 30 and 40 and brum, 23 a 40 and a 1 out of 2, a 30 and 40 and tenny, 2 out of 3 and 40 and throw, 2 a 30 and 40 and brum, 2 a bois. 40 and tenny, 2 out of 3 and 40 and tenny, 2 out of 3 and 40 and tenny, 2 a 3, 40 a 1 and bois and 30 and 40 and 1 out of 2, a 30 and 40 and tenny, 2 out of 3 and 40 and throw, 2 a 30 and 40 and brum, 2 a bois. 4 a brum and out of 3, 4 tenny and 3, 40 tenny and 3, 40 tenny and 3, 4 a brum and out of 3, 4 tenny and 30 and tenny and 30 and 1 did-em and 1 and 3 and 1 2 3 40 tenny and 3 and throw and tenny 30 4 a brum and out of 3 4 tenny and 30 and tenny and 30 and 1 did-em. I hope you guys found that useful, just giving you some more tools so that you can really start feeling the music, getting the rhythms down, starting to internalize how these embellishments fit in the music and how you can make them fit in your own voice. Because ultimately, music kind of is an extension of your voice. If you can't say it, you can't play it. So figure out how to say it. If you got something out of this video, guys, please think about giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to the channel. The more subscribers I get, the easier it is for me to make all this kind of content. If you want to go the extra mile, go ahead and head over to my Patreon, where as little as $1 a month can go a long way to helping support the channel and help me keep making videos like this. I try to put advanced viewings up there as much as I can, and there's also going to be increasingly unique content for my Patreon contributors. I do give Skype lessons if you want more personalized instruction. To find out more, head over to www.mattpiper.com, and there's more information there. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Again, I'm Matt Willis Bagpiper. Until next time, cheers.